Okay, so let's start with a little bit more about you. So, Benjamin, for those of our listeners who do not know you, how would you describe what you do for a living in one sentence?
Yeah, I'm doing partnerships at Google, helping clients succeed, especially also the financial service sector.
That was literally a one-liner. what's what's your motto?
My life, so I actually like, for those of you who have seen my website, like it's very big displayed there. So my big life slogan, I think that came up after spending many years in big tech and also carrying these learnings, to like clients across the globe. I really believe in like three things. Number one, I believe in being fast. If the world is becoming faster and faster, new mega trends show up, new innovations required, we also need to be fast, and otherwise we will keep lagging behind the market. However, when you're being fast and prioritize speed, you're risking to make failures, right? And I think that's why having a very healthy mindset and view on failure and seeing it as a data source from which you can learn is a very necessary cultural shift for the future. So I really don't believe in like failure obsessed culture, like in the sense of everyone tries to avoid it and doesn't want to look bad. But I really believe in cultures that encourage people to fail, but only once for the same time, right? You have to learn from it and become better. And that's why I believe in failing smart. And the third thing I think is really key is to think big. And here my slogan is really be fast, fail smart, and dare to think big. And I think this daring is very important because even though we often think about, thinking big and, everyone thinks they're thinking big, everyone thinks that about themselves usually, right? Like, but if you really think what that means, it means like, okay, I want my company should change the world for the next 100 years. In the next 100 years, my company will be the reason humanity has made a great leap forward. Or currently, I'm only active in Switzerland. Within the next 20 years, I'll be active global and will be the next Google, right? I think that's what really thinking big means. Of course, you sometimes need to be realistic. Of course, we need to tackle these roadmaps step by step. But I think if you lack the ambition to really succeed in this disrupted, globalized future, you will not make it that far. You will just be the big player who keeps, building on the strong market they have, but you will not actually disrupt the future and impact humanity for the next 100 years. So for the finance sector, I would really say you need to be fast and innovate. You need to be open for failure. It needs to be okay if someone fails, right? If a project gets scrapped, but you also need to have the aspiration to fundamentally change what you're doing, achieve a completely new level of customer satisfaction and customer service, and through that ensure that what you're doing right now is going to impact the finance industry of the coming centuries. And I think these three things are the key slogan I have both for my professional, but also for my private life.
Thank you. If you were given one wish to change something, what would you wish for?
Do you mean in business or in general?
Could be either, probably more in business than in general, but this is something general, can be
Yeah.
general.
So if it was a philosophical question about, the good of the world, I would have said to reduce all the unnecessary suffering in life, which is a very loaded statement, meaning that I believe we should remove all the suffering that people cannot cope with, because I think that's horrible. But the kind of like pressure and challenges and uncertainties of everyday life, I think those are quite necessary for human growth. So I wouldn't want to remove all suffering, just the one that becomes unbearable for people. And if you ask me about business, I would actually, it's kind of linked to that. I would say I would really wish that people across the globe had a way more open mindset and tolerance towards uncertainty and change. Because the big problem is right now we see that so-called black swans are appearing quicker and quicker than before. So like fundamentally disruptive new inventions or crises, like let's say COVID situation, Ukrainian war, let's also say something like a metaverse showing up, which might be a disruptor, might not be, right? In general, any developments in AI can be fundamentally disruptive for your markets. And that just means the world's becoming faster and faster. It becomes more complex, right? And more things to learn show up. And I think if you don't have the mindset that you enjoy this change, that you enjoy this faster future, you will feel scared by the future, right? You will feel really anxious about what's happening and if you will have a job, if you can perform. And that's one fear I would really like to take away from people, like the fear of the future. I would like people to have a very positive mindset. And I'm not sure if you have seen, but I'm quite active in Europe as a keynote speaker. I'm actually ranked as one of the leading speakers when it comes to new work, innovation, and business transformation. And I think my one key message, if you really summarize it, is you should have a positive future outlook, because the world is changing faster and faster, but we are also, you know, growing at the same time. It's not like tomorrow, you know, the whole world is like different and no one saw it coming. Usually there is a certain, like, you know, build up for these events. Of course, like really unprecedented crises can happen, but if we have an agile mindset that is growth oriented, that is happy about change, you know, and that is, even if it's like a horrible thing like the Ukrainian war, right? Even if something like that happens, our mindset should be ready to cope with it, do the best for everyone involved, try to help and like grow with it. And I think this kind of growth mindset, this kind of like agile thinking to grow with the world no matter what happens, is very important both for private life but also for businesses. You see that I sometimes don't make this distinction so clear, because on one hand I'm an entrepreneur and businessman, right? But on the other side I'm originally a psychologist. So a lot of the things that I talk about have also are very rooted in psychology and, well, my honest concern for people's well-being across the globe.
Fabulous. Thank you. And now, one thing you would never ever change.
That's a change. I would not want to change to stop. So I would not want the world to be frozen in a fixed state. And I think that's actually also, again, very important. Like when I was younger, I was always thinking about my dreams, you know. And when I had a dream, I was thinking about this frozen state of the world, you know. One day I will be this, or I will have this. And then it's like this frozen picture of the world. But the reality is that, you know, after you achieve a dream, the movie doesn't stop. So in the movies, we always have these happy ends, right? But in real life, after happy end, time goes on. It can be even better, it can be worse, right? And that's what I actually think is beautiful. I think even if things go bad sometimes, it gives you a chance to grow again. And trust me, like I also have been in situations where I was like wishing that it was not that way, right? But at the end of the day, I still believe that change is one of the most beautiful things in life, and I wouldn't want that to stop. So I wouldn't want humanity to start freezing itself in one world, you know, in a metaverse world, and just everyone is there in perfect happiness. I mean, it sounds tempting, but and for those who think this makes them really happy, that's fine. But for me personally, I wouldn't want this, you know, dynamic wildness of life to end, because I think it allows me to become a person that I haven't been before and to explore new avenues of life.
Okay, last one about you. How would your best friends describe you with 3 adjectives?
That's a good one. You should ask him yourself. No, but I think driven, creative, and probably funny. I hope at least the funny part is true. I think those are probably the 3 adjectives they use.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to the science of digital transformation. So, what have you learned from neuroscience that can help a financial services leader through digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So I think before we jump into the question, we have to quickly define what we mean by the terms. So if we talk about digital transformation in the finance sector, right, like the most important, I think, that's happening right now is an automation of like operational processes, right? So for example, you can to some degree reduce transactional accounting, or like, you know, paperwork and all these things. You can remove them with the big buzzwords like blockchain and machine learning. If you want to go deeper into those buzzwords later, I'm very happy to do so, right? I'm just now staying on a high level, but don't worry, I can also go quite deeper than that. So the other thing is, we see that we're moving a lot of operations to cloud, right? And this again frees up, you know, resources to actually care about what's important. So in the future, I think what's very going to be key for the finance industry is that we offer digital transformation, that we focus this on providing better and better customer service. So I believe the finance industry is going to be defined by customer service in the future, because the more we automate things, the more we achieve a very high operational excellence in that, the more it will matter that we understand our clients and we provide the best service that we can. So I think the most interesting jobs for finance right now are probably like business analysts, data scientists, but also storytellers. And I think whereas for the data science, it can help to also have a psychological view on it, you know, to make sense of your data, you know, to think out what kind of people have what kind of desires when it comes to finance, what kind of profiles have what kind of needs that you can fulfill as an institution, right? I think that's why you have one avenue of how neuroscience can help you. But I think the other one is really like in the area of storytelling and interacting with people, really understanding, how the human brain works, how the human brain processes information, how the human brain feels. If you understand these things deeply, you're much better able to like offer services and communication that will very be effective. And I mean, we talk now a lot about external factors, but of course also internally, right? Guiding your teams through digital transformation processes, guiding your people, right, through this uncertainty and change. It's also going to be fundamental, like making sure that you lead not how you think you should be leading, but how people want to be led, how people can be enabled to bring out the best in them. That's also going to be key, because the war for talent is not going to spare the finance industry. And if you cannot ensure that you take care of your people's needs, they're going to leave, right? And the same is going to be true for your customers. And so that's why I think the more we move away from a world where operational skills are key, because we're going to automate those step by step, the more the human element is going to matter. And the human element at the end of the day is neuroscience and psychology. And that's where I see a really big value, especially for the finance industry.
Coolio. So can organizations be treated like human bodies, like a central nervous system versus the rest? And if yes, what does it mean in terms of digital transformation?
I think the metaphor is quite nice, but we have to think a bit deeper. So I think the model right now of the world, right, before the agility movement, was that you have this central brain, and then you have like the legs and the hands and the people doing what the central brain thinks. I think this model that you first would think of is outdated, right? Like in the future, we're going to have very collaborative structures, lean hierarchies, and many cross-functional teamwork that's needed, right, to really make sure you provide the best service that you can. However, recent developments in neuroscience, they suggest something called embodiment, which means that you basically don't only have a brain in your head, but your whole body is a big brain, which means, like, for example, I mean, this is quite funny, like when you have stomach ache, right, or a bad feeling in your stomach, right, that also affects how you're thinking. And then you start to think, okay, am I nervous? I have a bad gut feeling, and also other things, right? If you when I was in the military service, if you're cold, right, if your feet are super cold, probably your mind is not going to be too happy. And I think this kind of embodiment shows how much the conditions of your entire body affect your thinking as well. So your brain is the central computer, is in the head, but the lot of what it's built on is like the feedback loops throughout your body. And I think that's actually what's going to be needed in digital transformation. So you need to have a feedback mechanism. So you need to have open communication and really use the data that's generated throughout your organizational body. So basically, in that sense, even if your hand, even if that's the sales representatives or the customer service at the counter, they should somehow feedback information to the management, right? What are people asking for? What are people asking for that come into the store? What is a 12 or a 18-year-old person asking versus someone who's 85? What are the different questions that they have? And maybe also something like, hey, what's happening on TikTok? What's happening, on social media? What's going to be popular in the future, right? And this is really where the feedback mechanisms become important, because we often talk about data science and becoming better at reading data. And of course, it's super important that you have a very clean data build up in your company. I mean, this sounds fancy, but what it actually means is like going through Excel sheets, adding the right commas somewhere, updating sheets. It's very hard and tedious work, but having a proper data foundation is the root for a successful artificial intelligence, which again, or a cloud application, which becomes the root of a digital transformation. But what people often forget is that we're often talking about these ERPs and we're talking about, forecasting and customer data. But what we also need is actually employee data. We need to understand what our employees, right, the best source of information we have, what they experience operationally in their everyday life, what they see, what they struggle with, how many hours they're wasting with a certain process that we could automate, right? And if you really have this kind of feedback loop available, like the human body has it, then I think you can really be successful in digital transformation. And so I would say, with a modern view on the human brain as an embodied thing within the bigger body brain, so to say, I think this view is actually very well applicable to digital transformation.
Awesome. Can the plasticity of processes be compared to that of the brain? How can traditional, like waterfall-based organizations foster such plasticity / flexibility?
Yeah. So this is also a really good question again. So just to give the audience a quick summary. So plasticity basically means the brain's ability to like change until the end of life, right? So it's not like fully changeable, right? There's some core that is always like going to be how we are. Usually at the age of like 25, we have like a more stable brain, right? Which is when the personality you have is actually going to be like, more or less stable. After that, it can still change, but, to a certain degree, it becomes more stable. But then your brain is like, able to like plastically adapt throughout your life. So we never stop learning. I think that's the key message here. And I think the beauty about that is like, I also believe the most successful organizations are like that. They're plastic. They keep learning, even though they have, let's say at a certain age, right? Like you have a startup, you're trying stuff, and then at a certain age, you become mature, right? Which is actually why I believe people are like adults, usually after the age of 25, because that's kind of like when your brain stabilizes to some degree. And it's the same for companies. So at a certain point of time, your company stabilizes a bit, in the way that you stabilize a bit the core values. And I mean, even the big tech companies, right? Like Amazon and Google, where I have been working and where I am working, those are kind of like, they're very innovative. They're changing every day. There's new products, but there's still a core. There's still something you can define the companies by. And I think once you have this core, the important thing is you don't stop learning, because if you stop learning as a company after a maturity point, it's like you don't develop anymore after 25, and that would be a pretty sad life, right? So there's still like a lot of change happening in your personality, in your values, right, in your outlook. And if you map this to like companies, I think it's the same, right? There's still a lot of chance for you to develop new values, new personalities, which will be the culture of your company, right? Or new products, right? And new situations, maybe new markets, right? I think one of the coolest things, for example, Amazon did, is that they suddenly were moving from a logistics company to like the cloud, right? They kind of invented the cloud business at the scale that it's now. And that's kind of like, I think, a very nice way of how you can have a certain personalities, let's say, but then really do something completely different. And I think this, to get back to your question, I think this is only possible if you have this kind of openness to change in your company, if you have an agile working method. And that's also a buzzword, right? Like, what does agile mean? Agile just means you don't really only operate in a fixed process, but you really like, change processes based on new information. You have like frequent check-ins, you have an information flow in your companies, right? And the third thing is, I think, again, the dare to think big, like you need to innovate. There's a famous quote from Larry Page, right, Google's founder, that if you're growing 10% year over year, everything you're doing is the same like everyone else, right? So, but a bit better. But like, if you really think about disruption, you shouldn't ask yourself, how can you grow 10%? But you should think about, how can we grow like 3x? How can we triple our company within the next year? In most cases, it won't work, right? But you should aim high, because if you aim low, you actually already lost the game. And going back to your question about waterfall based companies, so I think in the whole agility hype, and trust me, I'm a big hyper of it, I still think we have to make sure we don't put concepts on companies. We have to make sure we do what's best for the companies. And I think that's what I often see happening. I just recently had a project where I helped shaping the agility structure of a major telco company in Switzerland. What is really important is that we understand that we shouldn't like use buzzwords and then try to do it because everyone does it and it's cool. We need to find an approach that's really unique to us. So for example, waterfall structures, right? They can still very well work for companies which have like very clear sequences, right? Which have not much interaction between teams. It's very rare that companies have this anymore, but if your company really has a very sequential structure and has like not that much interaction need between the different steps, a waterfall structure can be absolutely fine, right? However, the more interaction you have between different steps in your processes, and here again, we're probably going to automate the operational parts going forward, but we really need to make sure the customer service is excellent, the more you need this connection. And that's why I think in the finance industry, where I really predict right now here on stream, where I predict that the key thing in the future is going to be customer service. That's going to be the key differentiation point. That's really where I think we need an agile structure to really integrate all these different viewpoints, data points, data points about customer behavior, but also data points about what the people, as I said, at the counter ask for, understanding what's happening in the social media landscape, understanding what kind of tech developments are happening, understanding what's happening in fintech, in crypto, in blockchain. The amount of information you need to really make your customers happy, it's so complex that I do believe we need an agile structure to be successful. However, agile doesn't need to mean you pick like either Scrum or you pick like, Kanban or whatever. I think it really means you look at the different methods, you try it out with each team, and then you find a system that actually works. Because at the end of the day, agile should just mean that your team is constantly thinking about its structure. But if you just take a buzzword, copy it, and then you're like, oh yeah, agile is done, and you take it off of a checklist, that's actually the opposite of agile, right? So I think that's really important also, that no matter what you call the structure that you're using in the end, you stay open-minded to change it, adapt it, and grow with it as time passes on. Just like the human brain and plasticity do.
Fabulous. What is your perspective on how people can upskill and learn continuously? And can people continuously improve?
Yeah, I think that's kind of like, right, the plasticity question we had before, but we can go a bit deeper here. So at the end of the day, yes, like there's no limitation to how much people can learn. Of course, there's like something like talents, certain people have different talents in certain field, right? And there's like definitely like there's actually a literature debate where you can say a talent actually means nothing else than a speed of information acquisition, right? So in a certain field where you really have a talent, it just means your brain is faster at interpreting and absorbing information. So there's definitely like a different degree to the level that people learn based on, a certain field. Nevertheless, I think that, for example, coding, right? Coding, many people think they could never do it, but I do believe that if you just go to a boot camp and coding and you actually try to do it, right, you're going to learn it. So I don't think there's a natural limitation to how people learn, but just there's a limitation based on the subject, how fast you will learn it, right? So that's, I think, what talent means. And I think the number one thing also for myself, I did some coding boot camps, I learned coding, but I didn't enjoy it that much. I think it's cool, the logic and everything, and my coding, I would say, is quite decent nowadays, but I don't have this intrinsic passion, right, that I see that certain people have. And that's also when I realized, hey, I'm the person who's really like, at the business front, who knows a lot about tech, but who's really the people and the people guy, right? And I think kind of like this honesty is very important with oneself, that you don't pick the career or the skills that you wish to have. Let's say in a Hollywood movie, you want to be the coding guy or the coding girl in the corner, and you want to be coding. I think it's very important you don't stick to this picture of yourself, but you actually ask yourself what you're good at. Of course, it's very important to have a vision of what you want to become, but I think fundamentally you're going to enjoy what you're good at, and you're going to be good at what you enjoy. So it's kind of like very important that you choose a field that you have a passion for. And I mean, this sounds like so generic, like everyone says this, right? But it's so true. Like if you actually have so-called flow experiences, you call this in psychology, a flow experience is when you forget time because you're so absorbed by the task, it's just flowing out of you, and your consciousness becomes like an observer, and like your body's just acting and creating. That's like a flow experience. And I believe if you don't work in a field where you can experience the flow, you can learn, you can grow, but you will never learn as fast and effectively as you could have in a field where you truly have passion. And so to give you like a differentiated answer, I for sure think everyone can learn everything, but the question is how fast will they do it and how much will they enjoy it? And so that's just like, I think in terms of career choice, that's really what I would suggest the audience, to not do what you think will pay the most money or what is the coolest on your CV, but to do what you're actually good at, because that's when you get promoted. That's when, your career goes through the roof. On the other side, there's certain skills which I think everyone will need in the future. And that's what I mentioned with like the growth mindset, the open-mindedness, the readiness to learn about new technologies, the readiness to learn about new digital. And here again, I think everyone can do it, but some people like it more and some less. So in personality neuroscience, for example, we also have the Big Five model. It's like OCEAN is the abbreviation, which stands for the 5 factors by which you can best differentiate two people. So if I and you want to explain how we are different, these are the top 5 factors how we can explain that we are actually different. And the first one is openness to new experience, which means the degree to which someone is willing to, or no, someone is enjoying, new situations, like a random trip to Amsterdam on a Friday night, right? Or going to doing something they never did, like bungee jumping, whatever, right? Just doing something out of your comfort zone. And that's just, there's not good and bad. There's just, some people enjoy change more than others. The second factor is conscientiousness. It's the degree to which someone, has discipline and prefers structures. So, some people, they like really structured plans and, really like clear roadmaps, whereas other people, they're more like working on the fly and they're kind of like maybe a bit less structured, have a bit messier rooms and everything. Like, I'm not implying the correlations here. Don't like I'm just giving you a surface view. And then the third factor is extraversion, introversion, right? Some people, they really get energy from being around other people, and some people get drained by other people, and they can really be good people person, but then afterwards they need to go home and watch Netflix and definitely don't meet anyone else. The fourth factor is agreeableness, the degree to which someone has the courage to speak against the group. So if you're very agreeable, you're probably going to be silent if you don't agree with a group, even though you could raise your voice. Whereas if you're very unagreeable, you're probably always going to go against the group just for the sake of it. And the fifth factor is neuroticism. It's basically the degree to which you're emotionally stable. So whether you are, someone who's very like emotionally rich, right, or more like, emotionally a bit more, let's say, balanced, right? And I think now looking at these personality factors, openness to new experience is something very important, right? It's a very important skill for a world that keeps changing. The problem is that these personality factors, they're often biological to some degree. And so it is hard to change them because they're like, deeply programmed in our brain. But nevertheless, they can change, right? I think also agreeableness is important. Like, the more agreeable you are, the less you're willing to share information that people actually, would need in your company. And that's, I think, the responsibility on you to, bring yourself into the conversations and share information that, as you said, in the human body model, can travel up to the central unit and change something. But also it's the responsibility of management of the future. And I do a lot of leadership trainings on that. It's the responsibility to ensure that people actually can speak up and don't feel judged or punished for, saying something not so accurate or wrong, right? So it's very important that you as a manager, and I cannot emphasize this enough, build structures that allow people to speak up and that allows information to travel in your system, right? Because only like that, the little hormones and neurotransmitters can travel throughout the body and actually get stuff done. And I think in that regard, yes, to answer your question again of this little excursus, yes, people can learn for their whole life. There's no blocker to that. There is a difference in speed, and there's a certain limitation based maybe on personality factors, how people like to learn and what they prefer by nature. I do think there are certain skills that everyone will need in the future, like willingness to change, openness to learn. And I think that just means you have to invest in training, because some people have this easier by nature. Some people find it harder by nature. But if it's hard by nature, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it needs more effort to change it. And that's what would be my answer to your question. Like, yes, continuous learning is possible. However, your passion is definitely going to determine, and your talents, how fast you learn something. And there are certain, preferences based on personality, how people acquire information. And I think this is really the job of the person, right? To kind of like step out of the comfort zone and, face this coming future, this ever-growing faster future that's happening. But it's also really the job of HR and the management to provide a space in which people can flourish like that.
Thank you. So looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning, what's the future of learning? Do we really need to know everything? What will be the added value of the human brain?
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the key thing here is like to build onto what I said before, right? Like, no, of course, we don't need to know about everything, right? Like, especially in the operational field, right? We're going to have a lot of automation, like, we will have cloud-based ERPs, right? To really like process our our planning. We will, automate like a lot of transaction processes. If we have a proper blockchain installed, we can also like, cut down a bit on auditing and cut down a bit on the whole safety procedures, right? Of course, safety is key, but we can make trade-offs here if we trust technology and it's actually proven to be good. And that's kind of like, where we will free up a lot of expert knowledge, right? So that's a lot of expert knowledge that will actually fall away. And I think this and there's other automation, right? You can also automate basic customer service, right? With like chatbots or smart agents and stuff like that. So, and I think as you operate a lot of these processes, right, the amount of knowledge that you require is going to go down, right? So you're going to need less wide knowledge, but you're going to free up time. And this time, I think you really need to invest it into thinking how to make your now more lean finance institution, how to make it really like customer centric, and how to make it like, how to rethink your operations. Like, is the way that you gather data the right one? Is the way that you learn from data properly? Is the way that you interact with clients properly? Is the way that you position your products properly? These things, I don't see them automated soon. I think those questions, they're still relevant, like making the bridge between your clients and your institution. That bridge, I don't think it's going to be automated. Like, this is something where we still need a human brain. And as I said before, the number one thing for finance institutions is going to be customer service. It's going to be how to differentiate yourself. And of course, customer service here also means making sure that you're secure. Your data is secure and it's private and it's like established, so that people have the trust in you. So trust building and quality are going to be fundamental in the future. And I think here it needs a human to know a human. Still, I mean, in 2080, right, maybe machine learning will be better at predicting human emotions than humans are. But at least for now, I think humans still have an advantage when it comes to like human interactions. And I think that's really where we need the human brain. And the other thing is like rethinking operations. So I think the operations themselves are going to be automated. And I think this is happening by 2025 and 2030. This is going to become standard, right? That we operate most of our operations. But then what we need is actually, we still need people to make sense of the data, right? To make sense of it. That's data science, business analysts. So this is going to be really important still. The second thing is we really need people to rethink how we do things, because yes, we can automate processes, but what processes do we automate and how? I mean, that's really going to be important, like program management and project management. So I think that's going to be something that is still required. And then the third thing where we need the human brain is everything when it comes to like facing customers, positioning your brand, building partnerships. I don't think people really want to, automate that. I think people still like to have a human interaction. Of course, certain tedious processes can be automated with a chatbot, with a smart agent, but I don't think you should try to move your entire institution to like only smart agents. I think that would be a bit too early in human development. Maybe in 50 years, or let's say 30 years, maybe people will don't want to meet other people anymore when they interact with companies. Yes, then we move fully to smart bots, but I don't see this happening in the next 10 years. So I would say this is really still where the human element can bring a lot of unique extra value.
Fab, thank you so much for that. Okay, is process improvement a machine thing or a people thing?
That's a combination, hybrid word, right? That's kind of like what I just said. So I think the people are going to be responsible for designing it until AI can do it better. But the people are still important for, talking to other teams, being cross-functional, talking to clients, to understand, talking to like employees, to understand, how good we are doing with these processes, how good we are doing with these systems. And of course, machine learning, can make predictions and forecasts about, hey, if we do things in a certain way, how will it end up? How many transactions will we mess up if this happens? If you have a Lean Six Sigma quality approach, you should only mess up like, let's say, 3 transactions per 1 million processes, right? I think you can use machine learning a lot to like make sense of enterprise data and, to analyze systems. But at the end of the day, like, it will need a human, right? It will need a human element to observe the processes and improve them. But also you can do this based on data generated by machine learning. So I think it's more like of a hybrid world than a world where AI replaces humans. It's more like AI will replace some jobs, that's for sure. But if you train people, if you help them develop, they can maybe become project managers of the operations they were doing themselves before. And then they knew how it worked manually. They can observe, what the AI is doing. They can make sense of the data, check if there's an error, because if your Excel sheets that you load up into your, or that you feed into your Python codes, right? If you use that one, if they're erroneous, then AI is going to make a mess out of it, right? And then, so I think it still needs an eye to make sense of the data, and it also needs to creativity, which is actually something AI is really bad at. Or, well, that's a philosophical question if they can ever be creative, right? But I believe so, by the way, because I don't think there's much difference between the brain and computer to a very, very narrow degree. And so I think if you have an incredibly complex AI, you can achieve human brain level. But there's also like some really good arguments why the metaphor is not fully accurate, which I can explain another time. But basically, to go back to your question, yes, I do believe that process improvement and like this human element of cross-functional collaboration, of customer service, that requires people. But we shouldn't see, like, we still should include like intelligent systems into this to provide us with data that we can leverage and to provide us with new insights. So I would say it's more of a teamwork thing, at least in the near future. Maybe one day it will be a pure AI thing, but for now, I do think that there's a human element that provides a lot of value.
Fab. Anything else you wanted to add, Benjamin?
Just I think one thing, like stay excited for the future. I would really encourage everyone listening here to not feel scared about AI replacing your jobs, but to really think about how can you and AI work together in the future, where operational excellence comes from both humans and robots. And so I think the one thing I would like to share with the audience is my life slogan: be fast, fail smart, and dare to think big. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Benjamin.